All right, let's continue talking about the Federal Reserve System. Okay, and there's NPR podcast, which gives us a very good description about the birth of our Federal Reserve System. Okay? And it talks about the history. It's actually it went all the way back to the beginning of 20th century, when some commercial bankers, including J.P. Morgan, found that it was necessary to establish a central bank to protect the commercial banks. Okay? And then the podcast also talks about the actions that J.P. Morgan took, okay, to establish the central bank in the United States. Okay, I will post that podcast on Moodle, and during our online meeting, we can also discuss some details in that podcast. All right. Over time, the central bank finds two things it has to take care of. The first one is to regulate banks. Okay? These commercial banks, sometimes they would like to take extreme amount of financial risks because of the profit maximization. Okay? However, the whole financial system is closely tied because the banks are holding the assets with each other, okay, and they also have the liabilities with each other. So if one bank got in trouble, it could, lead to a massive destruction of the whole system. Okay? And that's why the central bank needs to take a close look at, the financial information or the reports of those commercial banks to make sure they don't take excess amount of financial risks. Okay, make sure they operate under regulation, under law. And the second job is more macro, okay, more national level, is to control the money supply. Right now, for banking regulation, you're gonna learn more from the money and banking class. Okay? And so here, let's put more focus upon the control of money supply, right? And I also find a flow chart on the website of Federal Reserve System, which I believe gives us a visual, more straightforward way to understand the structure of the Federal Reserve System. Okay. Now here, as we already said in the previous video, on the top of this system, it's the board of the governors. Okay, 7 of them, and appointed by the President of the United States and confirmed by the Senate. Okay, and under the board of governors, there's a committee which is super important. It's the body of the system, the primary body of the system, making a lot of important decisions about our monetary policies. It's called the Federal Open Market Committee. Okay, and all 7 members of the Board of Governors are supposed to sit on this committee, plus 5 of the 12 regional banks presidents. Remember, we said across the nation there are 12 regional banks, right? So 5 of them will be, sitting on this committee. So they're rotating on and rotating off. Okay. And when we move towards the right of this flow chart, we actually go to the bottom level of the system. Okay, and we find 12 regional banks operating. And totally, there are 25 branches and 9 additional offices for processing checks, okay, or providing other services to the local commercial banks. And these 12 regional banks are actually owned by the commercial banks. Okay, so there are across the nation 3,400 member banks. Okay, and they contribute capital to establish the Federal Reserve banks at the regional level. Okay, and then these member banks are also being classified or categorized on the basis of their size. Okay, and then they have been divided into 3 groups: large bank group, medium-sized bank, and small bank group. Okay? And each group would elect their director or their representative. Okay, so you find that each regional bank with 9 directors. Okay, 3 Class A banking, 3 Class B public, 3 Class C public. Okay, and then these directors at each Federal Reserve banks appoint, their president, okay, and send the president to the Federal Open Market Committee. All right. And so here again, you can take a closer look at these afterwards, this flow chart, and it will give you a pretty detailed information about how the whole system works. Okay, but here I want to take a moment to remind you the question I raised in the previous video, which is, do you believe the Federal Reserve System is part of the executive branch of the federal government? Okay? Or put it differently, how would you describe the relationship between the Federal Reserve and the federal government? Okay? I think this is very important for us to understand the monetary policy making process, which we will discuss later. Okay? And it's also quite important for us to understand these checks and balances in our federal government or Federal Reserve System. Right? Now think about these, and later during our online discussion we can talk about these. Okay? And in the next video we're going to continue talking about monetary policy tools. Okay, so through what tools the Federal Reserve can change the money supply, okay, the amount of money circulating in our economy. All right.